became a photographer against my parents' wishes. So they disowned me. My cousin revealed I make six figures at her party. Now they want $100,000 in reparations and are crying about it. Hi. So I, 28, female, have been working as a fashion photographer for the past 6 years now. Photography was something that I was always passionate about, so I decided to skip college and apply for internships with other well-known photographers, and I landed one right after high school. My first internship was not with a hugely accomplished photographer, and hardly anybody knew him in the business, but I was happy to be working with him nevertheless. Slowly, I started assisting other photographers, watching their work, and the more time that I would spend on shoots, the more I would learn and get confident about my work. Finally, at 22, I got my first solo shoot, and since then, I've never looked back. I've been doing pretty well for myself, and in the last few years, I've consistently made 6 figures every year. So that's a huge accomplishment, but unfortunately, my family has no idea of my accomplishments and still thinks that I'm good for nothing. As a photographer, my job is quite literally just behind the scenes, and we are obviously not as well known as the models we work with. The people in the industry know us, but unless we are extremely popular, most other people don't bother to learn our names, and I don't think I'm at that stage yet. That is probably why every time I go home, my parents make it a point to remind me that my brother is a lot more successful than me at his young age and that I should do something more respectable instead of wasting my time and energy on photography. My parents had never been happy with me, and for them, my brother had always been the genius of the family. My brother is 2 years younger than me, and when we were in school, he was always better academically and used to be a straight student. I, on the other hand, was more interested in stuff like singing, theater, and even sports, but studying had just never really been my thing. So I was a pretty average student, and my parents constantly compared me to my brother, who was younger than me, but was still doing so much better, and how I should try to live up to the standard he had set. It was just constant, and I used to get into a lot of fights with them over this until I realized no point, they would never appreciate me, so I started ignoring them. My relationship with my parents had always been strained at best, but then, after high school, when I decided that I was not going to go to college and was going to try my hand at fashion photography, my parents just lost it. We fought about this for months, and finally, they told me that if I decided to do this with my life instead of getting a college degree, they would never forgive me and would have nothing to do with me. I did not let that stop me though, because I knew that my relationship with my parents was not my priority at the time. I wanted to be a fashion photographer, and that's what I did with my life. For a few years, they were really upset with me and did not even speak to me. So that was quite difficult for me since I was really quite young, and so I had to rely on other members of my family for help. The help that I needed was mostly financial, since before that, I had only ever worked part-time jobs over the summer and stuff, and that's all the money that I had, which was way too little to afford to live on my own in a new city. And since I was an intern back then, I didn't get paid much either, so I desperately needed people to help me out, and thankfully, my aunt, my dad's older sister, would often send me whatever I needed to cover my expenses. Her daughter and I have always been great friends growing up, and naturally, she has always had a soft spot for me. But even then, I would still feel quite lonely sometimes, since I didn't have the support of my family and my parents, and my brother had started to act like I never even existed after I left home. My aunt never told my father that she had been helping me out with money, because then, that would lead to arguments between them, since he would definitely accuse her of trying to encourage me to do the wrong thing. But my aunt would keep me updated on how my parents felt about my decision, because every time she would meet them, she would talk to them about me, and most of the time, their reactions were still negative, and they would quickly change the topic, which was quite disheartening for me to hear. But then, one year, all of a sudden, they just insisted that I come back home for the holidays so we could reconnect, and I ended up going back home that year to give our relationship a second chance. I had expected some really emotional reunion, but they were pretty normal about the entire situation. Later on, my mother told me that they had decided to reach out to me because it was pretty clear that I was not going to change my mind, and they did not want to be perceived as the kind of parents who did not support their children's dreams and ambitions, because that would look bad. So I realized that they had only reached back out to me because they wanted to preserve their reputation instead of looking like bad parents, not because they had come to accept my decision. I was really disappointed, but I decided to stay in touch with them because I believed that eventually, I could get them to change their minds about me. I've kept them in the loop about all my achievements and accomplishments in the past couple of years, but even then, it's never felt like they are as proud of me as they are of my brother. My brother graduated with a business degree, and then, he started working with a friend of my dad's. He makes pretty good money too, and my parents are constantly bragging about how my brother started supporting them financially as soon as he started earning. It's not like I hadn't offered to help them out financially myself, but they were the ones who refused to accept my help because of my unconventional career, telling me that they wouldn't feel comfortable taking money from me because they were not sure if I would be able to lead a comfortable life without it myself. I knew for a fact that this was not coming from a piece of concern. This was just them trying to remind me once again that they would rather count on my brother than on me because they did not think that I was doing well enough for myself, and no matter what I did, I was just never going to be good enough for them. Even when I tried to tell them that I would be just fine, and I could support them, they refused to believe me and chose to rely on my brother instead. And it wasn't even like they could do without the help. In the past couple of years, after the pandemic, they had been struggling to stay afloat financially because the cafe that my parents ran had not been doing well. They had already lost a lot of money during the pandemic, and about 2 years ago, they had to shut down and retire early. So that's when my brother started supporting them and they refused to take my help, and it was really insulting. So after that, I did not even insist on keeping in touch with him anymore. We would only meet each other at family events, and there, I would be as civil as possible, but that was it. I stopped going back home for the holidays as well because I knew that even if I did, they would not appreciate me. They would just use it as an opportunity to berate me and make fun of me. And I didn't need that sort of negativity in my life anymore. I was just done. My relationship with them has gotten significantly worse since then, and nowadays, we hardly even speak to each other. Very few people from the family know about my feelings on this because I don't like talking about it, and one of them happens to be my cousin who recently got engaged. She hosted an engagement party a couple of days ago, and of course, my family was invited and so was I, but I wasn't able to attend because I had the flu. And there, in my absence, my cousin had a conversation with my parents that made them call me up after many years. Before I talk about what happened on the phone call with my parents, I have to talk about what my cousin told me. After the conversation with my parents, I immediately called my cousin up to speak to her about it, and she told me that at the engagement party, my parents had been bragging about how my brother had received a huge promotion at work and now, he would be making almost double the money that he had been making earlier. I don't know if that's true or if they were just exaggerating, but my cousin told me that it was getting on her nerves because not only was worth it making that entire party about themselves, but they were also totally ignoring the fact that they had another kid who was doing just as well in her life, if not better. And she knew that no matter how much I pretended that my relationship with my parents did not affect me, it obviously did. I wanted to make them proud of me, and even though I had achieved so much, it felt like I could never do enough, and that was very upsetting for me. She knew that, so she decided that she was going to put my parents in their place and take a stand for me. And while they were bragging about my brother, my cousin decided to bring up how great it was that now, they had 2 kids who were making 6 figures a year. Obviously my parents were pretty shocked at that because in the past couple of years, they had not bothered to keep in touch with me and I had never told them about how much money I made because I did not think that was necessary. Anyway, after dropping that bombshell on them, my cousin didn't add anything to it, and later on, the very next day, my parents decided to call me up to ask about it. Of course, when they called me, I was quite surprised, and then, when they asked me if I actually did make 6 figures a year and if I had been making that kind of money for the past couple of years, I decided to tell them the truth because I thought that they were finally calling since now, they wanted to congratulate me and tell me how proud they were of me. That was pretty stupid and delusional of me because as soon as I said that, they told me that they couldn't believe that they had been pressuring my brother to help them out financially for the past few years, especially when I had already been doing so well for myself. They had the audacity to get upset with me and tell me that I should have told them how much money I was making so that they could make an informed choice about which kid of theirs should be helping them out financially. I was actually speechless, because that was not the reaction that I've been expecting, even though in hindsight, that's exactly the reaction I should have been expecting. And if you guys are not shocked at the audacity yet, let me just tell you guys what happened after that. So, when I did not say anything, my parents started to tell me that they had put a lot of pressure on my brother so far and he hadn't been able to save enough money for himself in his future because he had been busy supporting his parents. That was not the case with me, and now, they wanted me to pay $100,000 as reparations since they were my parents too, and I needed to share my brother's responsibility as well. They made it sound like I'd never even offered to help them out, as if I had been evading responsibility so far, whereas it had actually been them who had snubbed me in the beginning. I thought about the situation and I literally just burst out laughing at them before I hung up. I really couldn't think of any other reaction apart from laughing because it was so ridiculous to think that they were actually expecting me to agree to their terms. After that, I spoke to my cousin, got to find out the truth, and since then, I have actively been avoiding them. I already blocked them after the phone call, but then, they started texting me from a burner phone and I blocked that as well. All their messages just say that it was not cool of me to hide how much I had been earning, and if they had known about it in the beginning, they never would have asked my brother to help and would have accepted my help instead. My brother, who generally stays out of these things, recently texted me as well and told me that he doesn't want to take sides, But my parents do have a point. He told me that he also believes that so far, our parents have been treating me unfairly and they should have been more supportive of me. But he also believes that if I really wanted my parents to accept my help initially, when I had offered to take care of their finances, I should have specified exactly how much I make instead of letting them wonder, because it's true that this is not a career that they know much about. They couldn't have known that I'm doing this well for myself. The other thing that he said was that so far, it was just he who had been helping our parents out, but it was true that it was my responsibility as well, because whether I liked to admit it or not, they were my parents, and they had raised me, so I owed it to them. Now, I'm confused about a couple of things because of whatever he said. I obviously don't feel bad for my parents at all, but I do feel bad for my brother because so far, we haven't had a great relationship, but it hasn't been as bad as our parents. And I hate to think about it, but he might have a point? Ida, for not telling my parents exactly how much I make?